Alright, so today I want to show you some of the ball python hatchlings that I have for sale from last year, from 2019. As a matter of fact, I hatched out about 100 snakes and I'm down to just 22 hatchlings. As a matter of fact, I went to FedEx today and I shipped out 10 of them, which is, you know, they're going pretty quick. There's just a few that are left and they're getting pretty big. They're getting nice and beefy. I actually have them listed over on Morphmarket, on my Morphmarket store over there if you're interested. And kind of the hard part about, especially with the normals, you know, a lot of people look at the normals for $50 and they're like, yeah, I want to buy this snake. And then they find out the shipping in a lot of cases is actually more than the cost of the snake itself. It's kind of hard to swallow on the low-end snakes. Although if you buy something that's a little more high-end, you can actually justify the shipping. But it's kind of interesting. At this point, they have some pretty good weight on them to where it's almost worth spending the money for shipping because they're nice and big and beefy. They're almost, I would say, kind of almost like a sub-adult size at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show you these 22 ball pythons that I have left for sale, and we'll just kind of go through and I'll kind of give you just a little bit of insight on each ball python as I go through them one by one. Alright, so I'm going to start with this beautiful coral glow. This is actually a male coral glow, and it is a male maker. So this actually came from a male coral glow as one of the parents, meaning that this is actually a male maker. So if you actually bred this to a snake, all the offspring that have coral glow in it are going to be males because it only produces male offspring. And I've heard you can actually produce a female from a male maker, but it's pretty rare. And it's kind of interesting on this one. This is just a coral glow with no other genes in the mix, and you can see as they age and mature they start getting these little freckles all over the snake, and usually the older they get they kind of lose some of the orange highlights and it turns a bit more yellow, and sometimes the freckles can really pop out. You can get a lot of freckles and it really depends on the certain line. I'd say this one will get quite a few freckles as it actually ages and matures. This one is actually 50% het pied because the coral glow male that it came from, the parent was actually 100% pied. So there's a 50% chance on this one that it carries one copy of the recessive pied gene, although you really can't tell from just looking at the snake if it carries pied or not. Really awesome looking snakes. I think coral glows are one of my favorite standalone base morphs. It's actually a co-dominant, so if you breed this to anything else, half the babies will come out looking like this. They'll be coral glows. Alright, so this is Fluffy. This is a male normal. Look at how big this snake is getting. I'm thinking you could probably breed this snake already. It is so big. This would make a fantastic pet. As a matter of fact, you know, usually a normal this big would probably sell for more than $50 if you found it somewhere. This is a really decent sized snake. And it's kind of funny, once you can get them up on decent sized rats, they really start growing really super fast. And of course I have pretty much an unlimited supply of rodents here, so it's kind of interesting how some kind of lag behind when they're picky eaters at the beginning, and then something like this just really pounds the rodent. And this is, there's no recessive genes at all whatsoever in here, and it's kind of interesting. You can almost, it almost looks like there could be belly tracks on this, but as far as I know, there's no chance that this could be het pied. This is a really super big, it would make a fantastic pet. If you're looking for a pet snake, this would be really awesome. So this one we named Hunter. This is a male pinstripe, 100% het Desert Ghost. I think Desert Ghost is probably one of the genes that has the most promise as far as being really hot in the ball python industry. It's kind of, I'd say there's not a whole lot of people working with Desert Ghost. I'm trying to produce more and more of them. This is actually, I actually crossed my male, it was actually a visual pastel, visual Desert Ghost, and I crossed it with a pinstripe to get this one. Really beautiful snake. I really love these pinstripes. These are probably one of my favorite morphs as just a standalone morph, and it's 100% guaranteed this has one copy of the Desert Ghost, and I think the pinstripe Desert Ghost visuals are really awesome. All right, so this one we named Cupcake. This is a male scaleless head ball python. And you can see it's really going into shed. The eyes are graying out. But the funny thing is with the scaleless head, if you take a look at the top of the head, it's missing just a few scales right from the top of the head. If you actually breed two of these together, you get a completely scaleless ball python. And right now, the scaleless ball pythons are selling for a few $1,000s. As a matter of fact, when I first started in ball pythons, this snake right here was selling for $45,000. It was pretty crazy. I actually bought my male for $1,200 a few years later, and now they're just a few $100. They're not really that expensive. It's probably one of the most popular. That's probably why the price came down so fast, because everybody jumped in the scaleless head bandwagon and it pretty much drove the price down, flooded the market really fast. But everyone's kind of still waiting on the totally scaleless because there hasn't really been a whole lot produced, because you have to wait for the females a few years before they're ready. But this is a really awesome snake. No other genes except just the scaleless head in here. And it's kind of interesting with the scaleless head. You can almost see the scales are slightly different than a normal ball python. And a lot of times if you actually just mix the scaleless head with other genes, a lot of times the colors just really pop with just one copy of the scaleless head. If you have two copies of the gene, it's the super scaleless head, which is the completely scaleless ball python. All right, so this one we named Flicker, and Flicker is a male fire. This is actually the fire gene. This one's actually 100% het pied, and to produce this one, I actually have a visual pied that is also fire. It's a visual fire pied, and I crossed that with a normal, and I produced some fires 100% het pied and some normals that were 100% het pied. This is a really awesome snake. This is the first time I actually produced fires. Really awesome. As a matter of fact, if you actually breed two fires together, you get a super fire, which is an all white snake with black eyes. Really interesting gene. And someone was actually asking me, how can you tell the difference between a fire and a pastel? And usually with the pastels, I'd say some pastels almost have the same kind of a broken up pattern like this, but the pastels are definitely a lot more yellow than this one. This is almost like kind of a khaki, kind of a greenish, kind of a camouflage color, I guess you'd say. It's kind of like a desert camo, versus if you had a pastel, it would definitely be a lot yellower. And the other thing with pastel is you can actually tell by the eyes. If you have a pastel, most of the times you'll actually see green eyes, and on this one you can definitely tell the eyes are not green, they are black on this really beautiful fire. So this one we named Raven, and Raven is a Lemon Blast, 100% het Desert Ghost. So the Lemon Blast is actually a pastel and a pinstripe. And with this particular snake, I think it got a really intense line of pastel. You can definitely see the sides are really kind of a brightish, almost like an orangish yellow, and I actually have a really intense line of pastel floating around in my collection. And when I mix it with pinstripe, it usually forms kind of this orange down the side. If you actually separate the gene, it's a really bright yellow, probably one of the best lines of pastel. This is a really awesome snake. This is a male. If you take a look at the belly's usually on all the Lemon Blasts, they're kind of clean. This is a funny snake. He's kind of a little disoriented there. I had to flip him upside down. I really love these Lemon Blasts. Probably one of the best pinstripe combos that are out there. All right, so here is Sunshine. Sunshine is a spider. Spiders are really awesome. They kind of get a bad rap because some of them kind of have a head wobble. I'd say out of all my snakes, these really don't have any type of severe head wobble. You can almost see a little bit that if you kind of stretch them out, sometimes they get a little bit kind of a tilted head, maybe a slight head wobble, but nothing really severe on any of my spiders. And the way I produced this, I actually bred a spider pied to 100% het caramel albino female. So this one's actually a spider, 100% het pied, so it definitely carries one copy of the pied gene. There's also a 50% chance that this carries one copy of the caramel albino gene. If you take a look at the belly is is usually pretty clear for most of these spiders. Really awesome snake. As a matter of fact, it almost looks like it has like calico in it, but this is just part of the spider morph. It comes with all this kind of pattern and designs. It looks kind of like it has multiple genes, like it almost looks like it has Enchi in it because of the reduced pattern, but it's all from the spider. Really awesome. Probably one of the best standalone morphs as far as ball pythons. So here's a really interesting snake. We named this one Spot, and Spot is pretty unusual. As a matter of fact, this one's actually a pastel pinstripe, but if you look at the pattern, it looks really reduced. And the funny thing is you know, actually with my male desert ghost, I actually have a male pastel desert ghost, and usually with the pastel desert ghosts, you have a pretty reduced pattern that I thought was kind of associated with the desert ghosts. And it kind of looks like on this one there is Enchi in the mix. This definitely looks like a Lemon Blast Enchi, and this is also 100% het desert ghost. I think this also has the really intense line of pastel. You can see it's really kind of a brightish orangish yellow through the sides. Really good looking snake. If we take a look at the belly, look at how big this guy's getting. He is getting really big. And I'm almost tempted to keep this and kind of breed it back to maybe something like one of my normals and see if I can prove out the Enchi and separate it from everything else. I'm pretty much 100% sure at this point that this one has Enchi in it. Alright, so take a look at this beast of a snake. I think this is one of my biggest hatchlings. This is actually another male normal. We named this one Buttons. Just a straight male normal would make a fantastic pet. And the funny thing is, it seems like the normals eat really well as hatchlings, and they just really continue to probably be the best eaters out of anything. You know, any snake that really starts really well is going to finish really well because it eats early, and that means it can move up in size as far as the size of the rodents really quick, and it gains weight really fast. This guy is really big and beefy, kind of going into his shed a little bit. You can tell he's kind of fading out just a little bit, but he would make a really awesome pet. Just a straight, normal, classic, wild type ball python. So this one is named Cobra, and Cobra is actually a ball python. He's not a cobra, we just named him that. He is pretty much exactly the same as the last spider I showed you. This is a male spider, 100% het pied, 50% het caramel albino. If you take a look at the belly, it's kind of interesting. Some of these spiders actually do have a few little specks right along the belly. Not really any problems with any head wobbles on these. These are really beautiful, awesome snakes. I really love the spiders. So here's another male normal. We named this one Boomer, and Boomer has no other genes in the mix. So you can definitely tell there is a trend here with these normal ball pythons. They're all really big and beefy. I probably should have got some weight on these, but it seems like it changes all the time. But you can kind of see how big these are getting. These are really nice. They make some awesome pets, and really none of them are really snappy like they used to be at the beginning. You know, when they kind of got out of the hatchling stage and they got into the point where almost all of them are biting me like crazy. Now, actually, when I clean the tubs, I actually hold on to each one while I'm cleaning the tub, and I pretty much, I think I got bit once the last time I cleaned on one of the, it seemed like it was the double het, the albino pie double hets were kind of seemed like they're the most bitey out of all of them, but they pretty much have all really chilled out. They would make awesome pets. So here's another coral glow. We named this one Magnum, and if you take a look at the coral glows and kind of the size, you can definitely tell they're smaller than those normals. The coral glows were actually one of the last clutches of the year to hatch out, so that's another thing you kind of have to take into consideration. These are probably like 2 months behind some of the bigger snakes, but they're still really eating. I'd say all these are eating really well. I pretty much feed a mixture of mice and rats, live and fresh killed, not so much frozen thawed. I usually euthanize with CO2 and then feed them that way. These guys will eat pretty much anything at this point. I'm sure they wouldn't have any problem with frozen thawed. All right, so here is Porky, and Porky is a female normal, one of the last females that I have in my hatchlings. It seemed like the females sold first, and the problem with this one is it was really slow to start. I actually thought I was gonna have to cyst feed this one, and I spent a little bit more time actually feeding this one live mouse hoppers. I kind of marked it to go back and feed a little bit more. Now it's actually over on rats, and it'll do frozen thawed and fresh kill. It'll do pretty much anything at this point, but you can definitely tell it's a lot smaller because it had a really slow start. All right, so here's another female. The funny thing is I actually named this one Elvis and then probed it a little bit later on and found out that Elvis was a female. I probably, actually after I named this one Elvis and kind of made my mistake, I started using gender neutral names just because I named Elvis and it was a female. And this one's actually 50% het pied, so there's a 50% chance that this one is het pied, and you really can't tell too much. Sometimes you can actually tell if they have really strong tracks right down the belly or the tail. I say you really can't tell on this one. This one's kind of going into shed. She's got some pretty decent weight to her as far as being normal. As a matter of fact, I have quite a few normal female breeders. You can pick them up pretty inexpensive, and if you breed something like a bamboo to this, you get 50% bamboos. That's pretty much how I started out my very first year breeding ball pythons. All right, so we named this one Peewee, and Peewee is another coral glow male, 50% het pied, no other genes in the mix, and you can definitely tell on these coral glows, they are really stunning as far as the line of coral glow. I've seen some that are a lot more faded out at this age. These keep a lot of the color and the pattern in here. You can definitely see there's like highlights up on the top that you don't see in a lot of lines of coral glows. And you can definitely tell on this one it has a lot more freckles than some of the other ones. This is a really awesome morph. All right, so this is Elektra. Elektra is a male, and this actually came from the same clutch as my spiders, but it didn't get the spider gene. So this one is actually 100% het pied, 50% het caramel albino. And you can definitely tell on this one there is some strong het pied markers. This is what we're talking about when we talk about het pied markers, are these strong marks, especially right down here by the tail, right by the vent. You can see on both sides of the tail right here, right before the vent, pretty much in this area. Almost looks like someone took a marker and drew two lines. That is pretty much a sure bet. If you're like 50% sure and you actually see those, you're almost guaranteed you actually have a het pied. Sometimes it can actually fool you though. I've seen snakes that are completely normal that look like they have het pied markers. So I'd say it's not 100% sure. That is why they call it recessive, because you really can't know for sure. But I'd say, this one we know 100% sure it is het pied, and you can see the tracks. All right, so this is Apollo. This is another coral glow, 50% het pied, and this poor guy is stuck in his shed a little bit. His tub dried out a little bit. This is actually the very first ball python hatchling that I ever had that was stuck in a shed, and it seemed like the tub dried out just a little bit too much at the wrong time, and he got stuck in a shed. But this is just a coral glow male, 50% het pied. They're all male makers, so all these coral glows will produce male coral glow offspring. All right, so this is Happy. This is another female. I'm actually happy that I have another female. Happy is a female, 50% het pied. So essentially what this came from is I actually crossed my coral glow male 50%, it was actually 100% het pied, and I crossed it with a normal, and then I got some coral glows, 50% het pied, and this one actually didn't get the coral glow gene, but there's a 50% chance that this one actually has the pied gene. If we take a look at the belly tracks, which isn't always accurate, you can't really tell on this one. This has a really awesome belly on it. Take a look at that. That's pretty awesome. You can't really see for sure if this one actually has het pied markers. Doesn't look like it has the markers, but you can never really tell if they don't have the markers, if it's actually het pied or not. Really awesome snake. All right, so take a look at this ball python. This one is stunning. We named this one Frosty, and Frosty is a male pinstripe. 100% het albino, 100% het pied. And this thing, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but this thing is just glowing. I just can't believe how bright it is. It's like a super bright gold. It's almost fluorescent. It is amazing. And it's kind of interesting. Some of these pinstripes are a lot brighter than others. I actually had another one that was almost as bright as this. So impressive. I just love these pinstripes. If you actually find one right after the shed and you find, you know, kind of the right example of the morph, and it seems like, you know, you hatch out a bunch of pinstripes and some of them will be brighter than others. I don't think it is really line dependent when it comes to pinstripes. Really beautiful snake. So this one actually is one of the double hets. I actually bred my albino pied male to a pinstripe, and this got the pinstripe gene, and it's actually 100% het pied, 100% het albino. And on these, of course, you really can't tell any tracks at all on the belly because the pinstripe pretty much masks out any of the het pied markers. Really awesome snake. Getting really big too. That is a really awesome snake. Alright, so take a look at this big old snake. This is actually, we named this one Fluffy. Fluffy is a pastel. You can definitely see there's pastel in there that has a reduced pattern, and there's a lot of yellow. And usually pastels have green eyes. And actually, this one's actually 100% het Desert Ghost too. I actually produced this breeding my pastel Desert Ghost to, I think I bred this to a Lemon Blast. So you can definitely tell, I don't know if you can see that on camera, you can definitely tell the eyes are green. It's almost a really dark green on the eyes, if you can actually see that. Let's see if I can bring it up to the camera. I don't know if you can see it. Sometimes it takes the right light at the right angle to actually see the green eyes on the pastel. And I'm zoomed in a little bit, so I think I'm kind of out of focus, getting too close to the camera. Let's see if I can get the focus a little bit better here. I don't know if you can see the green eyes on that one. Sometimes it's really hard because they're almost a dark green. If you mix it with the right genes, sometimes it has really bright green eyes. Really awesome looking snake. Alright, so here is Snuggles. We named this one Snuggles. This one's actually 100% het pied, 100% het albino. And the funny thing is, you know, most people say that with certain genes, you can kind of tell that if they're feisty, if they're, you know, a little bit more food aggressive. And I would say the bamboos are pretty food aggressive when it comes to feeding. And for some reason, it seems like the double het albino pieds are like super food aggressive. They're like really, they're really super feisty when they're small. This guy will eat and eat and eat. And this is probably one of the last ball python clutches that I had last year, the double hets, and they've been really super good eaters. It's pretty amazing. Usually, you know, if you have, I've always had trouble with the visual pieds kind of being picky eaters, which is, seems like everyone says the visual pieds are picky. And let me tell you, when it comes to the double het albino pieds, it is the complete opposite. Alright, so here is my last snake. This one we named Titan. Titan is another double het albino pied, and I'd say the food aggression is pretty much on par with the bamboos. They're really aggressive feeders. And this one, let's see, you can definitely tell on this one has really strong het pied markers coming down the belly, almost like someone took a marker. This one is definitely 100% het pied. And the other interesting thing I found about the double het albino pieds is the pattern is really super reduced. It almost seems like it has Enchi in there or something, but there's definitely no Enchi in any of these. But you can definitely tell there's really no alien heads. It almost really super reduces the pattern with the double het. Kind of an interesting characteristic of getting the double het albino pieds. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Kat Moore asks, what are the top 10 morphs for males and females that I should get for a ball python breeding business? And that is a very good question. I'd say that's probably one of the top questions. A lot of people starting out in ball pythons, they're like, what should I get? What should I breed as far as ball pythons? And let me tell you, there is a lot to choose from. There are hundreds and hundreds of morphs out there that you can actually choose from. And pretty much my strategy is I go from the low end all the way to the, is pretty much the high end that I can can afford. You know, you can go all the way up to pretty much, you know, where you can break the bank getting snakes. But I like to have a really big variety of reasonable prices. So you kind of have to think about it. If you're selling at a reptile show, someone comes up to your table and they have like 50 bucks, what can they buy? Versus if they have, you know, maybe a couple thousand, and it kind of gives them all these options as far as what you have on your table. I like to have a really big range of prices. Some people really focus on the low end, but then a lot of times I think you really don't have a really good return on investment. Sometimes it's hard to stay afloat if you start breeding really inexpensive ball pythons. And then if you breed really high-end snakes, I would say it's a lot of times if you produce too many high-end snakes, a lot of times you can actually crash the market, or you end up with a lot of snakes that a lot of people won't buy because there's a limited demand for really high-end ball pythons. Not a lot of people are throwing down thousands of dollars for ball python. So I'd say probably the best bet, and kind of what I shoot for, is like a low supply of everything from the low end to the high end. So you keep the supply low, but you keep the prices kind of reasonable. Pretty much everyone that walks up to my table, they can afford a snake somewhere on my table in that price range. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.